All right. Now, though my hearing aids are a little bit busted, um, I'm going to talk a little bit and present a few things about the Kennedy assassination in the hopes that, maybe like the way that I found the record Can Bamyasi Okra Shelton at Woolworths one day. Some, you know, something half decent can be a contribution, even though it's cheap and usually overlooked. When Oliver Stone made his movie about the Kennedy assassination, he whinged that the research community came and lined up at his money bag like pigs at a trial, he said. I shudder to think that those hardworking people who had dedicated so much time of their lives in such an atmosphere of disrespect could be treated to such a cruel comment by somebody who was exploiting them and exploiting JFK the way Oliver Stone was and does. They're not perfect people. They banned me from the research community for reasons I'll explain, but I've learned a lot from them, and I'm still in touch with the best of them. They're dealing with a cutthroat squad who represents the U.S. government's official standpoint, which is that Oswald acted alone and fired 3 shots from his Madlick or Carcano rifle or whatever it is. I'm not particularly up and up about firearms. I don't own one myself. But they destroyed, or stumping for people who destroyed a great deal of evidence. As a result, there's a mania on the part of the people who realize that's not what happened to dispute them on the terms of absolute hair-splitting fidelity to the evidence, which has one limitation, which is that they ignore evidence. As surprising as that may sound, they put aside any evidence that isn't already agreed upon, like bullet fragments, brain fragments, x-rays. Films of interviews with doctors at the hospital are all agreed upon, and they go over them over and over and over and over them. But and they argue over who could be blurry images taken in Dealey Plaza. But there are things that they won't go into, which is like a background check on Melvin Belly, who represented Jack Ruby as an attorney. I was getting kicked out for giving a background check on this guy. So, and they're very patient. They go back, they double back. If the newcomer comes in, they're eager to start from scratch and focus the newcomer on what happened. Many of them are truly loyal old people. One of them passed away. He made a great discovery before he passed away. And on his deathbed, his name was Wood Lemons, he said, "Please help JFK." This was a dying man. And he said on his deathbed, "Please help JFK." I mean, that's what sort of people that Oliver Stone was depicting as pigs lining up at a trial. I really don't want to bang on about it, but they're better than that. And what one of the things I guess police forensics is structured to do is follow a chain of evidence. And even though the chain of evidence gets really, really messed up that day in Dallas, you know, when people touching things they shouldn't be touching, you know, um, bullets disappearing, you know, descriptions of the rifles being changed, Oswald being gunned down. There's still a chain of evidence that often gets overlooked. Let's start with the rifle. Okay. The rifle belonged to Lee Harvey Oswald, they concluded from some receipts from a store called Klein's. And so they concluded it was Oswald's rifle, and his widow said yes, it was his rifle. She was staying at the house of Ruth and Michael Paine. She was a boarder there, and the rifle was in their garage. Oswald went there one day a week to visit her, not his rifle. And there's no receipt from them that he checked out the rifle or snuck in the middle of the night. It's just that it was his rifle and it ended up in the book depository. Therefore, he took it there, even though it was at somebody else's house. So whose house is this thing at? It was Michael's. And Michael, you know, Birth Paine, whatever his name is, Paine, Michael Paine. And he has a Paine. You know, he goes to, you know, before the Warren Commission or whatever, the news reporters, and they're like the everyday la-di-da American family whose lives were disrupted by this communist who killed Mr. President. And we should be forever grateful that they helped us solve this problem after he was gunned down in the basement of the police department. So Michael Paine's uncle sat on the board of directors of the United Fruit Corporation. He used to go, you know, on the schooner with the Roosevelts up in Maine, up in the, you know, not kind of Bankport where Bush was, but more Mount Desert Island where Caspar Weinberger lived and stuff. He'd go up there, and the driver of the limousine, William Greer, who pulls it to a stop and turns around, waits for Kennedy's head to explode, worked for United Fruit Corporation. And Allen Dulles, who was fired as director of the CIA by Kennedy, and whose domino theory Kennedy more or less lived to refute and dismantle. Kennedy believed in independence movements around the world. Allen Dulles, who sat on the Warren Commission, also worked on the board of the United Fruit Corporation. So the rifle was in the hands of the family of somebody from United Fruit. The limo was being driven by somebody from United Fruit, and the Warren Commission master from the CIA was on United Fruit Corporation. He was known to be Kennedy's enemy. Meanwhile, you have this man named General Edwin Walker in Dallas. Edwin Walker appeared on the cover of Life magazine. He appeared on the back of a book called The Fascists of Britain by Colin Cross about Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Union of Fascists. Depicted him as the most dangerous man in America, 1962. He threatened to kill JFK after Kennedy put down the race riot he led at the University of Mississippi over James Meredith. And there's films of Oswald in New Orleans on the same reel as home movies made in his house. So he becomes the key witness for Allen Dulles' Warren Commission, because he says, without clear evidence, that Oswald shot at him and missed. You know, the good guys always get missed, but the liberals always get killed. You know, is one of the patterns in this stuff. So you get these guys, they get together and they frame Oswald, it's obvious, and put the rifle in the book depository behind his back and got him down the police department. And ever since, people have said it's a Twilight Zone, it's a UFO story, a communist killed JFK, and so on. So that's obviously not true. So I did a background check on some of these characters. Alan Dulles met with Adolf Hitler in 1933, and my friend John Pisa helped me with a lot of this. He met with Adolf Hitler in 1933 for Schroeder Bank to forgive Adolf Hitler's campaign debts so he could ascend to the chancellorship of Germany. And um, John McCloy, who also sat on the Warren Commission, sat in Adolf Hitler's personal booth at the Munich Olympics. Um, and Melvin Belly, who beamed down from Star Trek, where he was a guest star to represent Jack Ruby, was the attorney for Hermann Goering's estate. You know, these guys, you know, there's, I think this, I saw some, I know for a fact that the movie moguls of Hollywood were collected into Berlin after the fall of Berlin to discuss how to exploit World War II for movies, which they were reluctant to do, some of them. And they got together on Hitler's yacht. I think Melvin Belly was got to go out on Hitler's yacht too. That's all supposedly very status symbol, you know. And there's a scene in Dangerous Journey starring Errol Flynn, who was a notorious double agent meeting with Hitler, and Ronald Reagan, in which Ronald Reagan looks in Hermann Goering's train and says, Goering's train, that's almost good enough for me. Understated is that only Hitler is good enough for Ronald Reagan. And there's a lot of semiotics that confirm that the Hollywood, Flynn, and Reagan people were putting together Hitler's escape so that he could be in Argentina for an operation they were calling Casper. So, you know, I get kicked out of the research community for doing these kinds of background checks. They don't like me, you know, very much. But, you know, you see in the pattern in one of the later Reagan movies, which I'll just take a moment to share with you some scenes from it. You know, the scene with Reagan holding the back of his head while I was out there in front for a little while, and in the front of his head. Then bang, I was flat on my can. Now you're going to remember this day for a long time, it says. Okay. Now, so you could deny that that's reminiscent of the action in Dealey Plaza, but I see it more as clear evidence that Dealey Plaza was a media setup from Hollywood, that the Axis was formed. And there's a lot of strange imagery that comes out of the immediate days that followed that they don't go into because they're too conscientiously conscribed to a little menu of bullet fragments and head movements and films and blurry images. Like, notice the macabre way the bayonet goes right up through Jackie Kennedy's midriff. Henry Wade, the sheriff who framed Oswald, was the Wade in Roe versus Wade. And then in this strange crowd image, it looks so much like Sergeant Pepper's crowd image, that you see this blurry image of very reminiscent of Edgar Allan Poe. So you wonder, is it possible that some of these images are being set up? Like, when you look at Dealey Plaza, there's this girl named Rosemary Willis wearing the white top and red skirt, which is associated with the Shinto shrine. And there was a Japanese man standing under the nuclear bunker sign. As the limousine, the death cab for Cutie, the van holding Oswald's body pulls away. And there's quite a few magazines that need to be explored. Inside Hollywood's daring bedroom scene, inside the limousine with JFK where he gets his head blown off, there's certain so I go into this on my website, but there's certain strange things about the way that angles are being designated in these images that are suggestive of very inside knowledge about what was done to Kennedy. And this is something that's known as semiotics. And when you look into the publication history of the people who worked in semiotics, you find, among other things, the popularity of something called the Police Gazette. If Jimmy were president, looking up at Adolf Hitler, and many of their magazines had proclaimed for a long time in that era, in the 50s, that Hitler was alive. And what would he do if he came back? And they were the leaders, despite right up to the Kennedy assassination, they were playing this theme. They were the leaders of the claim that Castro killed JFK, and they stopped talking about Hitler still being alive. So it is rather strange that you have a situation set up by people who ignore the implications of their own theories when these theories come to fruition, being studiously shut down, inquiries about this stuff being studiously shut down by the JFK assassination research community, where I am officially banned. Now, you see these images, I put them in my website. This one, you don't actually see it when you watch the movie, because it's on the reel of the film. It goes by too quickly. But I started looking at this frame by frame, because there's something that looked like Lazarus or Ratharos with the U.S. over the swastika. And when you look at it frame by frame, there's the U.S. over the swastika with Reagan next to Errol Flynn. It's almost like a signature piece. And I found Franklin Graham's book. He says every Contra had a nickname. So if she were ever caught by the Sandinistas, real names wouldn't be disclosed. One man in the chaplain's corps was called Hitler. He had been an executioner in the Contra army. Apparently his cohorts had chosen his name well, because at one time Hitler had been very proficient in his responsibilities. Hitler was one of our promising young chaplains, and after he came to Christ, he excelled in every area and soon became the head chaplain. One of his assignments was to give the announcements following each lecture. One day, as Reuben was finishing up, he said, "Now Hitler will come and give us our announcements." Hitler stood up before his friends. In Spanish, he said to Reuben, "My name, no Hitler." "That's fine," Reuben said, but he didn't give his change of name much thought. The next day, Reuben announced again, "Hitler's going to, no more Hitler, no, that no longer my name." "Well," said Reuben, "we've been calling you Hitler for the past several months. If you're no longer Hitler, what is your name?" "Lazarus," he said with a smile. "Call me Lazarus, for I have been raised from the dead." Everyone applauded as Reuben put his arms around Lazarus and hugged him tight. There were tears in everybody's eyes. So there's a certain ideology that penetrates this Casper business of Lazarus being back from the dead with tears in his eyes for the most proficient Christian, which is Hitler. And where do you think this stuff should come from? But King Edward, who was a friend of Adolf Hitler, who was sent to Argentina. And you'll notice that some of the other things they did in the cinematography, the rerouting of the motorcade is symbolized in the Neva pornographic logo, which you can see here, I think. And, they have their hands over their ears. We're living at Tacoma right now with a threat from Donald Trump's machine to drop a nuclear bomb on the Mount Rainier as they attacked us in a surprise attack on 911. If I don't apologize to Tojo's emissary Yoko Ono, and has a look-alike of this girl who wrote the script I found from the Texas school book. Gail Burston, with a moment, an expert about the disappearance of rich people to protect their estates, named Anne Rand, and the caption is, "It will be just like starting over." So you have, a Fluxus language anthropology at work that shows up in the Beatles music, who, of course, are legendary for performing sing-alongs on the album celebrating the murder of JFK, like the White Album, which was released on the anniversary of Dealey Plaza. Sing-alongs, everybody's singing because we zapped them right between the eyes. And horrible sexual ideas about, the face blast. And they put a nerve agent, they poured acid on my own face to get even for Yoko Ono about my father's naval service, and they forced me. King Crimson raped had my best friend raped, tortured me, killed. They mastermind as the magician behind it, Peter Sinfield, engineered the murder of the Kennedys, demanding that I apologize to Yoko Ono, or they would blow up Mount Rainier, right, with a nuclear bomb. And we're supposed to call them patriots. Those are the people with Franklin Graham. Those are the people in the Contra Army. Those are the people with Caspar Weinberger up on Mount Desert Island, where they pulled the AIDS war game on me, Two Virgins Pussy Ball, and went fishing with Michael Paine's father and the Rockefellers and so on. That's just what this circuit is. They've got one of these guys down in Seattle who was a friend of E. Howard Hunt at the recovery program and so forth, denying the whole thing while threatening me with handguns if I question their control of the pornographic movies, the people who say a swastika was a sacred African symbol in the Pittsburgh NAACP. That's where hatred for American principles starts to really get out of hand with some of these nuts in the black extreme movement. They think they're so brilliant, taking up with Tojo Ronin. They're going to get the white, and it's like, I don't know what to say about any of that, but they obviously, Malcolm X was one of the first people to catcall the murder of JFK. He even got in trouble with it a lot, with Elijah Muhammad. There's a lot to discuss about the Kennedy assassination and what Kennedy's brought to America in terms of our hopes for, choosing our own battles, restricting the damage we did to innocent rivals in the world, comprehending and building negotiations and diplomacy, having a good neighbor policy, being compassionate about our fellow man in America and around us, understanding that our limitations to our resources are not necessarily a limitation to our ideals, that education should be and could be our most important asset and our most easily exported commodity. But we have closed the doors on educating foreign societies. We give them weapons instead of ballot boxes. You know, there would not have been the carnage in Vietnam. That we certainly would not have had the AIDS attack, which is how I got interested in this because I saw that as a witness.